thank you for doing this for TiE Boston. It's such an honor to have you here. I want to be respectful of your time, and I know you have a packed schedule. So let's dive straight into the questions, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, Anu. It's a pleasure to be at this event. Of course, TiE is an amazing organization, and I was one of the founding members of TiE in Bangalore. So, that's the connection I have with TiE. So I know, the kind of initiatives and efforts that you're pursuing in building this entrepreneurial ecosystem globally.
All right. So I'm going to start off at the very beginning when you started your entrepreneurial journey. You had the odds stacked against you. You were a very young woman, barely 25, woman in India in the 70s, and you were embarking on a journey in a field that was cutting edge, biotech, that was something new. And yet you decided to pursue these, what I think of as close to impossible dream. So what made you pursue this dream?
Well, Anu, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I actually never planned to start a business of my own. I had basically returned from Australia after pursuing quite an unorthodox kind of, career, sort of training as a brewmaster. I had actually done my master's in brewing science, and I thought I'll come back and pursue this career in brewing. But that was not to be because, India was very hostile to women in any field for that matter. And certainly brewing was a male bastion and they wouldn't have a woman running any of their breweries. So I was sort of told that this was not a woman's job and I had to, look for something else. And it was an accidental encounter with an Irish biotech entrepreneur that saw me start Biocon. So yes, I mean, because I was in this kind of, despondent mood and I was ready to kind of prove to others that they were wrong, so I was in that kind of a fighting mood that when I got this opportunity to start my own business, I thought, wow, at least I can put my knowledge to good use because, I started as an enzymes biotech company and the brewing process is totally enzymatic. So I said, well, I know a lot about enzymes and I know how they work. And at least it'll put my education and my knowledge to good use. So that's how I actually embarked on this entrepreneurial journey, quite by chance, with a lot of fire in my belly, with this sort of resilience to basically pick myself up and prove them wrong. And I realized that, I had to also fight the gender bias. So that was another aspect of my resilience. So I guess when I got into this, I was very confident that I could actually at least manage a business because I was ready to manage a brewery. And I think the rest of it came with a lot of fire in the belly and foolish courage, I would say. And so that's how I started off building my company. And of course, as you yourself just mentioned, I had a huge number of credibility barriers to overcome because, I was young, 25 years old. I had no business experience. I had no money in the bank. So that wasn't very good for me. And so I was considered high risk in every sense of the word. Banks didn't want to lend to me. People didn't want to work for a female employer. And of course, I had zero business experience. So I had to build that credibility as a person capable of managing a business. And that too, I was trying to start a business which nobody understood, which was a cutting edge biotech business. So yes, I mean, for me, it was a spirit of challenge, challenge that I really enjoyed. And it was a kind of a sense of purpose because when I embarked on this journey, I said to myself, I must create this as a science-led business. I must create this as a research-led business, and I must give opportunities for scientists to join me and pursue a career path in a science-led business. So I think those were the kind of driving, sort of guidelines with which I built the business.
What an amazing story. And thank God for foolish courage, right? I mean, not just for you, good for you, but good for the world at large, where you ended
Well,
up.
thank God that the brewing industry had a gender bias.
I think this is the only time I would say thank God for gender bias. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. So all entrepreneurs go through ups and downs. How do you keep yourself going during those down periods?
So Anu, I think every entrepreneur will tell you that, what's the difference between someone who starts a business and someone who doesn't? That is what defines an entrepreneur. Because people often get asked that question, are entrepreneurs born or made? And I don't agree with the fact that they're born. The difference between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs are that entrepreneurs are risk takers, right? And so when you're a risk taker, you can handle failure, right? Because risk is about, failures, handling failures, managing failures, mitigating failures. So failure is embedded in an entrepreneurial journey. If you don't have failures, I don't think you can become a good entrepreneur, because you have to pick yourself up and you have to show resilience, because you can't be running a business where everything goes smoothly and you have no hiccups, no mistakes, everything goes tickety-boo. Well, that doesn't really build companies, and you can't endure, because then at the first sign of failure you'll give up. So I think all of us go, the first few years are very challenging. I just described some of my challenges, right? And so every step of the way in building a company is fraught with challenges and failures. And, for instance, right in the beginning, I failed to get the kind of capital I needed to build my business. So when I was trying to scale up our homegrown enzyme technology, I just couldn't raise capital because, in those days, there was no venture capital. And it was all debt financing, and no bank wanted to take this high risk of funding something that was never tried before, right? And so I was not able to raise capital, and I was really getting very despondent because I needed that capital badly to scale up my technology. And it was again an accidental meeting with the head of ICICI, Mr. Vagul, who it just so happened had started a venture fund, and he said, hey, this is exactly the kind of business, the business I need to back, because it is risk capital. So I want to help you, and I'm not going to give you a loan. I'm going to invest in your company. And that was like, wow, I never even thought that was possible. And so instead of getting a loan, I got an investment, and he even felt I needed more. So he gave me more than I asked for.
Wow.
And of course, that was a sort of a eureka moment for me, because I never knew this was possible. And of course, thereafter, of course, ICICI did very well out of that investment, because in less than a year, they quadrupled their investment, because my Irish partner got taken over by Unilever, and Unilever wanted to buy up as much stake as they could in my company. And since I had given a stake to ICICI, which could have given them a nice little piece of shareholding, they decided to buy them out at 4 times what they had invested. And of course, in dollar terms, it was peanuts for them. And for Unilever, it was absolutely peanuts. So that was my first track record of credibility building and success building, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of challenges across the way. And even the technology that I scaled up, for which I raised this venture capital, it's not that it worked the day I switched it on. In fact, I had a setback, because when we tried to scale it up, we had made some mistakes in factoring scale up, parameters. So it took us almost like 6 months to correct all those mistakes we had made. But the moment it started working, it was a money spinner for us.
Wow. So I'm going to pick up on something you just said. There are challenges, there are low points, you get over it. And probably all entrepreneurs face the situation where when you're at a point where you're facing challenges, you have to persist like you did. But there might be other points where it's time to say, you know what, this is it. And I'm going to either pivot my business model or move on. How do you make that decision?
So it's really about taking business decisions which are good for the business. So for instance, I'll give you two instances in my own case. I started with developing enzymes, and I was very successful at, developing enzymes. I was doing very well, very profitable, and it was an exciting business, but somehow I felt it was a bit size limiting, because I felt that even if I made all the kind of enzymes that I was pursuing in the world, I still couldn't reach $1 billion in a short time. So I said, listen, I need to do something more with this technology that can help me build a business that can really scale up in terms of value and volume. And that business, which I identified, was biopharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got into biopharmaceuticals, I realized that the amount of investment biopharmaceuticals needed was huge. And it meant that my enzyme development might suffer, or would suffer, because if I wanted to pivot into biopharmaceuticals,
Right.
then how was I going to manage to do justice to my enzymes business? Because that was a mature business and I had to keep investing in it. So that called for a very important and hard emotional business decision, was to divest my enzymes business. And I did divest it in 2007. I just said I'm not investing enough in enzymes, and I can't afford to invest so much in enzymes because biopharmaceuticals is taking up all my investment, needs. And it is a business I want to develop in a big way, and that's where I want to pivot. So I divested it. Another mistake I made many years later was I decided, in haste, I would say, to try and set up a European base.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it happened that the European company came to me, the German company came to me and said, hey, listen, we are very good commercially. We can sell, insulin very effectively in the German market. And they actually came to make a proposal to me to market insulins. And so I thought, why should I allow them to market insulins? They were a small enough company for me to acquire. So I said, look, why don't I acquire you and you market my insulins? And I thought that was a smart thing to do. So I started by acquiring them. But within a couple of years, I realized that I couldn't afford to, keep that company going till I got my insulin in the market. So I decided that it was bleeding me a bit, because I couldn't afford the high cost of that operation. And so I finally took a very hard decision to say, hey, listen, I made a mistake. Why don't you buy this business back from me at a very nominal value? Because I think I'm not going to be able to use your capability base for another few years. And so I sold it back to them, and fortunately I broke even, but at least I didn't lose too much money. So that was another mistake I made. So, I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I don't think I had, been, I didn't let it get me down, because I took important decisions for the business. And I realized that, there are going to be challenging times. Even right now, COVID is a challenging time where in many parts of our business, I have not been able to get to 100% capacity because of logistics challenges, where, or maybe, you get this few people testing positive and you have to shut down that whole part of the plant. So those challenges are something that we have to, accept and move on with. So I think, to every entrepreneur and aspiring entrepreneur, more importantly, I would say that failure is a part of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that's
And
a
I
great.
always tell people it is a endurance race,
Mhm.
and I do believe that you know failure is temporary. You can always pick yourself up, learn from that failure, and move on. But when you give up because of that failure, it's permanent.
Mhm. Okay, I'm going to move us to a woman-based question. So I was reading an article that you had written a while back about how, as a young woman, you used to travel by bus and car to all these remote places in North India because you couldn't afford plane tickets. And the bus drivers would be worried about your safety and ask you, where are you going? And literally drop you off at the office so you could get there safely. And that made me think, while there are definitely disadvantages to being a woman in the 70s trying to build this company, were there any advantages?
Oh, there were plenty of advantages because I was a rare oddity, I would say. and and every time I would go to a government office and they would see me there, I would always be asked to come in first to meet the officer.
Mhm.
And much to the dismay and sort of disgust almost of my male sort of compatriots who would be waiting to see the same person, and I would come in after them, and suddenly I'd be asked in first. And they would start complaining to the what they call the peon. They would
Uh-huh.
say, how can you call her first? She's just come and we've been waiting here for an hour. And the guy would say, I don't know, sir has called her. So, I would get those kind of unfair advantages. And, I also, because I was a woman, I think they were very embarrassed to ask a bribe of a woman,
Mhm.
right? So I never paid a single bribe in my life, that way, because I took full advantage of the fact that they would never ask me for a bribe because I was a young woman. In fact, I remember going to my first government official who had to give me that permit to start my business. And in fact, the touts in the corridors would tell me, Arey, madam ji, agar aapko, I'll say it in English, madam, if you want this license or this permit, you have to bribe, and we know how to bribe, so you give us so much and we'll get your permission and your license. And I would walk into the government office and I'd say, hey, listen, what is this I'm hearing that I have to bribe to get a license? Now listen, I'm not very sure who to bribe, how much to bribe, when to bribe, and you better tell me what is involved, because if I have to bribe, then I should stop even thinking of starting a business.
Mhm.
And so the guy was horrified. He said, no, 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 please don't worry. You don't have to bribe anybody. You will get your license in a very straightforward way, and I'm here to help you. So, those were the days where everyone was ready to help women.
Such a great story. I wish we could get back to some version of that.
I'm
um,
sure there is still that version because women don't realize it, that, you know, a lot of the government officials really want to help
hmm,
women entrepreneurs.
that's good to hear. Okay, fast forward to current times with COVID. I know Biocon is a big player in the fight against COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about what Biocon is doing in this area?
So, as you know, we are not a vaccine company,
Yeah.
but we are a biotech, biopharma company. So, what we did was of course, we have a research services company called Syngene. And interestingly, of course, Syngene is providing a lot of support services for vaccine development. In fact, the chief operating officer of Syngene is an ex-vaccine person, so he understands it a lot. And so we are providing a lot of vaccine support services. And in fact, we are doing some vaccine development for customers. So, it's a research services company, so we're doing a lot in that area. But the first thing we did was to really jump into the fray when it came to diagnostics. Because if you remember, RT-PCR tests needed expansion at large scale. And the private sector was roped in to do that. Unfortunately, Syngene had a lot of expertise in RT-PCR testing. And so we basically jumped into the fray and started offering, we got ourselves accredited and started offering these tests, these RT-PCR tests. And we actually decided that we will do it free of cost for the government, because we said, let's develop these tests and let's get our lab accredited and let's provide support to the government, because the government needs to test a lot and they don't have enough capacity. In fact, we were recognized by the government as the #1 private lab to give them the maximum number of tests.
Okay.
So we were very proud of that. But in addition to that, what we did was we used our testing capabilities to keep our campuses safe. So we came up with testing protocols which actually could really bring down the amount of infection rates in the company to near zero. So today we are a very safe campus thanks to that testing protocols that we've developed. In addition to that, we also developed a ELISA kit for antibody testing. And it's a qualitative antibody testing, and now we're developing more tests, because even when you start getting vaccinated, you will need to know whether you are generated a T cell response, an antibody response. I'm sure lots of people will want to know that. And a lot of people will also want to know the durability of response. So there's going to be a lot of demand for that. So we are trying to develop these very innovative tests that can actually give you that information.
Okay. So
that was one. And then, of course, Biocon had a very interesting antibody that it was found to be very, effective in reducing the cytokine release syndrome, which was known to be the cause of death in many of the COVID patients. That knowledge was evolved over a few months, where they didn't know why so many people were dying. And they realized that it was because of a hyperimmune response to the COVID virus that was triggering a cytokine release in the body in a crazy way. And that was causing kind of a cytokine storm that was leading to organ failure and death. So because of that, we decided to try out this drug, which we knew had a very efficacious effect on many cytokine, sort of I would say more hyperimmune responses, like for instance in graft versus host disease, which means when you do transplants, your body develops a very intense immune response to the transplanted organ, and many patients who cannot withstand that immune response die. And this drug has shown to be very effective in preventing that. So we said, hey, this is the same kind of a case, and the mechanism of action seems to be very similar. So we repurposed that drug and carried out a small trial in India and found that it works. So now we are actually using it extensively in India. It's got emergency use approval. And we're trying to, and thousands of patients have benefited from this drug.
Okay, wow.
So we've done a lot of things in many areas.
So as usual, Biocon remains on the cutting edge, even as far as COVID goes. So Kiran, this makes me think of opportunities. So even though COVID has affected the world at large adversely, it feels like there are a lot of new opportunities. What do you think about the new opportunities? Like, where are they and what can people do to leverage them?
So I think every adversity, throws up opportunities, and you've got to start pivoting your business and become very agile to look at these opportunities very expeditiously, because you can't wait, right? Today, we've all been plunged into a digital world. Now, if companies like ours did not look at digital marketing opportunities, you've got now digital pharmacies, you've got telehealth, you've got a lot of digital opportunities in every field, not just ours, right? You just heard in recent times that people have come up with AI-based protein prediction software. Now that is amazing for us when we are developing drugs, okay? Today you're listening to CRISPR technologies that have just come up with a thalassemia gene editing technology that can fix thalassemia, right, in patients. So I think these kind of times throw up opportunities ahead of time. For a long time, it was an idea waiting to happen. It's happened.
Right.
So that's, I think, the excitement of these adversities. And there's an opportunity in every realm. I mean, today I can tell you a lot of young people are saying, how do we create digital tags for vaccines? How do we create temperature trackers or temperature loggers for cold chain? How do we get this? How do we do this digitally? How do we do that digitally? I think the digital world that we've been thrown into, including the Zoom call, has actually opened up a lot of new ideas and opportunities. And I think every entrepreneur can identify an opportunity that is unique, that can actually be differentiated, and that can actually potentially be a big idea.
That's a very positive and encouraging statement for all our members, most of who are entrepreneurs. Kiran, I was reading about your philanthropy. It looks like it's part of your DNA. You've been doing it for a long time, especially providing access to life-saving drugs to everyone. TiE Boston gives a lot of importance to philanthropy, as do all our members. What advice would you have for our entrepreneurs who are embarking on this philanthropic journey?
I think if we look at what COVID has told us and taught us, okay, COVID has taught us that a lot of what is happening today is because of greed in many, many ways. You can see that we've had excessive consumer greed, which has polluted this planet. We've had excessive focus on economic growth, which also has led to a lot of the climate change issues that we're talking about and pollution. And then finally, we've also said that we've had scant respect for our environment, okay, which we have been shown that in a few months of this lockdown, how our planet cleaned up, right? I mean, the air became cleaner. Actually, today I've never seen so much rain in Bangalore, for the last 10 years as I've seen it this year, which means that, this was a very important revelation saying that, the weather can improve. This was back to Bangalore 50 years ago when we used to have this kind of rain. So just, preventing the pollution during the lockdown, filled up our lakes, because of the rains. We've seen, trees in their lush splendor, like what Bangalore was used to, and so on and so forth. So I think all this should have taught us that do we really need the kind of money we all aspire for? I mean, I think we must understand that corporate greed is something which we must control. How do you use billions of dollars for what? Can you use billions of dollars just for yourself, indulgence? No. I just think that you need to understand that what the money that you've got is really something that others have allowed you to have that kind of wealth. I mean, who creates your wealth? It is the shareholders, right? It's people who invest in you who create that wealth. So how about making sure that you also share your wealth with those who are less fortunate than you? And by doing that in your community, in your society, I think it's a kind of it's of compelling self-interest, because when your community improves, you feel much better. Right. Do you want to step out of your house and just see slums and poverty around you? Or do you want to make a difference to that and make sure that you don't have those slums and those people who are starved or who don't have access to health and education? If you can make that difference, I think you will feel very, fulfilled as well. So my view is that basically it's of compelling self-interest to be philanthropic, because you do want to take people along with you. You want your society and your community to be a nice place to be in, right? And you want people in your country to be more educated. You want your communities to be, uh, more, not just educated, but they have better quality of lives. Don't you want all that?
Right.
So I think, philanthropy is a way of thinking about your society, your community. And I've always believed that it's a win-win. It's not that you're charitable. Never think of philanthropy as being charitable, because there is a bit of self-interest there.
Mm-hmm. That's a very powerful message, Kiran. I'm sure all our audience really will appreciate it, and I hope learn to make it a way of life. I know we are coming up to time, so I'm going to ask you if you have any final words of advice for our audience, especially entrepreneurs.
Well, you're in Boston, and of course, Boston has really become a huge biotech hub. And it didn't happen by design. It just happened because of the ecosystem that was created, where it all happened because people took risks, people bet on ideas. There was a strong academia industry connect where lots of academicians became entrepreneurs. And I think that's what makes Boston very special. And I think that's what we need to look at. How do we create ecosystems of excellence? And those ecosystems have to have these multi-sectoral collaborations between industry, academia, policymakers, and that's what really creates entrepreneurial hubs and success in terms of entrepreneurial unicorns. So, the fact that Moderna vaccine has come out of the MIT labs, and the fact that, many of these scientists and people have just become billionaires overnight, tells you about the power of entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just believe that this is a time for many, many such, entrepreneurs with small or big ideas to do something different and shape the world in a better way.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are on the board of MIT, so they've chosen well, and we hope to see you in Boston soon, once the world opens up. Kiran, I want to thank you. It's been such an honor, not just on behalf of TiE Boston, but also personally for me. And I have to say this on behalf of all women. Thank you so much for paving that road on which so many of us can walk on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I always want to see more and more women in this pursuing this path of entrepreneurship and basically playing a leadership role.
Yep. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.